show. I'm Ashley Krez and your host of It's All Millennial. Here we discuss important issues relating to a large segment of our population, better known as Generation Y. On today's show, we're talking about moving out, leaving the nest, and here with us to share their thoughts is Tyrone Matheson, a business and personal coach with LMI Canada. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So, I'm really interested in having discussion today about moving out and the differences of staying at home versus moving out. There's been a lot of research done around Generation Y and Generation Y staying at home longer than other generations, actually the past 4 generations. So, maybe we can explore a little bit about, why that's so, and any differences around staying at home versus moving out, right?
Well, I think you've hit some interesting points, that there has been some changes over the years in terms of how we look at the Generation Y, and I think there are these expectations on the individuals themselves on where they feel they should be, and expectations also from others on the outside on where they feel that this Generation Y should be as well in terms of their career and personal life and so forth.
Interesting. So all this pressure, isn't it? Expectations and pressure to get it right now, right?
There's lots of pressure, and then with that pressure, decisions have to be made in terms of, what do you do, where do you go, and how quickly you do it, and with that comes a lot of decisions that have to be done with that.
Yeah. So how do you, making that decision itself, right, versus staying at home. So, you've gone to school, college, university training programs. You've either paid for that yourself or with assistance. So now with debt, maybe no debt, you're faced with that choice. Okay, am I staying at home with my parents? Do I, move back home if I moved away at the beginning? Do I get a roommate? Do I, live with friends? Do I buy a place? So how are people making that decision?
I think a lot of them are doing it based on where they felt they should be at this point once they're done school. I've seen it from both angles where individuals have, they've graduated from school, they're done now, and they're looking for that career job to get into, and they're stuck. So they're staying at home until they find, that job that they're looking for. And then I've seen the extreme where other individuals have gone out and they've said, you know what, this is what I went to school for a certain thing, I've got out now, and then I have to do it, because if I don't hit a certain milestone, then in their mindset, they don't see themselves as being, I guess, successful in terms of those respects. So, there's lots of, everyone's different, but I think it all ties back to goals and expectations that individuals have placed on themselves in terms of where they see themselves.
Yeah. No, I think there's good opportunity to explore, what your goals are, and giving yourself sort of those milestones, right? And you must see that a lot as a coach, from the personal side, helping people determine, where they are now and where they want to be. And then, maybe you can tell me more about how you would walk somebody through some of those.
It's interesting because on the coaching side of things, you see a lot more people that have, I would say, dreams. They have a lot of I guess, things that they've thought about over the years on where they saw themselves, what they wanted to achieve, and so forth. But they never really put everything down to pen and paper to say, this is exactly where I want to be, and this is how I'm going to do it. So I find myself separating the two between the dreams and the goals aspect of things. Our job is just to sit down with them and just really to clarify those dreams that they do have, and to put a plan of action in place to help them to truly work towards achieving those things that they want to achieve.
So for example, I have the dream, to buy my own place. So from there, I guess together we would mind map, we would brainstorm, okay, so what does that look like, right? With, where I am today, my budget, what's realistic with my career, is that sort of how it would look?
You're absolutely correct, and, it's back to the basics. It's, SMART goals, making sure they're, specific.
What are SMART goals?
Things that are, looking at the specifics of that. When do you want to have a house, and what's that time frame? Give a date and write that down. And is it measurable? How are you going to measure your progress towards that? I think one of the key things that you just mentioned is the financing aspect of things. I don't think a lot of people really sit down there and just look at the cost of whether or not they should actually own a house versus renting and so forth. You know, is the goal attainable? Is it realistic? What's the time frame? Again, these are all expectations that we have on ourselves. But the key with the goal is that it's your goal, and you have the ability at any time to just, you know, readjust if you're not, you know, on track at the time that you expected to achieve that goal. So
yeah, no, that's the important part, I think, is readjusting and not putting so much pressure on ourselves, but saying, you know, what's realistic for me, right? And what does my time frame look like? Because as you mentioned, right, it's my goal, not your goal or his goal or her goal.
And that's a challenge because, especially when you get it out there and you let other people know that you have, I have this goal of owning a house by this time, or, you know, having a job, and then that time just goes by and you haven't done it. Now other people are looking at you as being, oh, a failure. They didn't achieve that. But when you personalize it, you have that ability to say, no, I've had to make some changes along the way, and I'm going to adjust it accordingly. And the failure is when you stop and you decide that you never want to proceed with that anymore, and it's no longer, you know, you just put it aside, no longer want to do it. That's sort of the failure. But, you know, it's to adjust accordingly as you go along. That's all part of the, you know, the process of growing.
I like what you mentioned about failures and, you know, viewing them as learning opportunities rather than as, you know, the quote-unquote failure, right? Because it's really just such a chance to reflect on, you know, what I've done and how I can do things better perhaps the next time, right?
No, I totally agree. I think John Maxwell, he says, fail forward. You know, make mistakes, learn from them, and just continue to go on, right?
Yeah. Well, it's been really great talking. I think you've left the viewers with some, you know, good suggestions and good ideas on, you know, goals. I like your paper and pen method, right, with writing out your goals, keeping them SMART goals, and, you know, remembering that, you know, there is no failure, and that whatever your time frame is, right, that belongs to you. So thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to do so.
You're very welcome. So keep watching after the break when we talk about educating yourself about the finances of whether you're staying at home or whether you're moving out. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the show. For the break, we were talking about the differences with staying at home versus renting for millennial adults. And now with us to share their thoughts is Lilah Taylor, a mortgage broker with Ultimate Mortgage and Finance Solutions. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, as I mentioned before the break, my previous guest Tyrone and I, we were talking about the differences of, making that decision, right? With whether, I went to school. Now what, right? I'm considered that adult, right? So, am I living at home or am I moving out? So, as a mortgage broker, maybe you can share some information with that decision process.
Sure. So, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people, when they're done school, there's this, mentality that they have to buy right away. They have to get married right away. They have to do all of these things in order because that's the way it's supposed to go. So we're programmed on some level, to think that's the next step. And again, there's that pressure that it comes sort of upon us. When I get to sit down with people that, whether they are still living at home with their parents or they have gone away to school and now they're moving back, if they even have the opportunity to live at home with their parents, because let's face it, some people don't have that choice, especially if they go away, they haven't learned the responsibilities associated with owning or having more than a cell phone bill. And to be honest with you, a lot of people, frankly, don't even know what it looks like. So it's interesting. And that's one thing I love about what I do, because I get to sit down with a lot of those folks and say, listen, why do you need to own right away? And how much have you saved? And, why is your debt as high as it is? They just, again, it's about learning, and I think that that area is such a focus that they have to be there. So you know what? I think if you are going to stay at home with your parents, great, but are you learning anything really about what it's like to cut the lawn? Pay more than your cell phone bill, like I mentioned earlier. There's property taxes, there's mortgage payments, there's heating costs.
Do you think that falls on the millennial or the parent?
Both,
right?
Well, it's funny that you say that.
Who's where does it fall?
You know what? I could say the parents, and then I could also say, the Generation Y. But at the end of the day, I mean, and it's interesting. I mean, not only do I have the pleasure of meeting so many different clients and different types of people that don't, again, all come from the same type of background. I get to see those kids that are at home, and I shouldn't call them kids, but the young adults that are living at home and just have no clue. And I have to say, as much as you say when you're renting you're throwing your money away, when you're renting you're learning something. You're learning how to balance your finances, you're learning how to budget, you're learning how to save a little bit still, and then also know that you need to have fun, and that you have to put money towards the responsibilities of paying your bills. And there's a lot of Generation Ys that don't have that concept. It's a different time that way as well. I find parents are, and again, 50-50, coddling their kids more than they should be at this stage of their lives. They're not teaching them anything. So I can't necessarily say it falls on either or. My parents brought my sisters and I up to work very hard, and if there's anything that we wanted, we had to be able to save for it, and we had to take on that payment. So I feel that I was very fortunate being raised the way that I was. But I know many people that are my age now that got given a lot, didn't have student loans, got to stay at home until they got married. Some of them are doing great, and some of them are failing miserably. So there you go.
Well, there's always both sides to the coin. Right?
Absolutely.
A big part of it must be education. I think that's sort of the common theme with what we're talking about, right? Is educating yourself, taking that initiative to say, okay, you know what? If I am still living at home, that's great. But again, from the previous conversation, here are my goals to get me to where I want to be, as you've said, with saving money. Or, if it is that next step with renting, then, what percentage of money am I putting away each month to help me get towards, the longer term goal? But even then, what is the longer term goal, right? For some people, it is okay just to rent versus, buying something as an investment is more important to them. So.
And I think that if the Generation Y, a lot of them can sort of kick out what they think they should be doing versus what they really want to do, and be realistic with realizing what their financial situation is. In comparison to what they can handle, then great. They're starting off right, is what I should say. And they're not setting themselves up to fail. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that are going and buying these, you know, depending on where they live. Let's say the GTA, you know, they're mortgaging high, rates are low, so the payment looks like, well, why would I have a rent? Why would I pay rent when I can have a mortgage payment? When the reality is, it's not just a mortgage payment. So again, I hope that sort of answers your question, but
it does, it does. So I guess you must integrate part of that, right, when sitting down with somebody to say, okay, you know what, let's try and take a look at the overall picture with, you know, where your finances are, and as you said, keeping things realistic, you know, with what my monthly cash flow is, to, you know, really take a look at, is this mortgage feasible, you know, and is buying a house, whether it's my first home or, you know, a second home, is that is that realistic for me?
Exactly, and I think that once people can be honest with themselves, and you can say that in any area of your life, as soon as you're honest with yourself, then great, you're off to a much better start than you would be by denying the reality of, let's say, your financial situation. So I have no problem. And I mean, in a very constructive way, and I share this with all of my clients, honesty is the best policy. Numbers don't lie. So I'll show you what it looks like based on your income, based on your debt, and based on your savings. And those three areas alone will help people see, in my opinion, when I break it down for them, the bigger picture. And you know what? It is scary buying your house for the first time. But fear is not a bad thing. It's a good thing.
Absolutely.
It forces us to see things that sometimes we don't want to really look at. And then that's where we can kind of break that tie of, okay, I know my friends are buying a house, and I know my brother bought a house at this age, but I'm not there. That's not who I am. That's not where I'm at. And again, the truth hurts sometimes, but it'll put you in a better position.
Helping you, as you said, seeing ourselves a little more clearly. Right? Do you have any last tip or two, you know, for those people considering or who are already there on how to optimize their living arrangements?
Oh goodness, I could go on for a long time, you know.
I
know. Sorry, I'm a talker. Just be very realistic and as realistic and as honest with yourself as you can. Don't deprive yourself from doing the things that you want to do. Life is short, you know, and I think that, you know, you never want to put yourself in a position where you're house rich and cash poor. You will not enjoy the process. And don't rush.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate all of your thoughts. And keep watching after the break when we talk more about how to get by financially. Stay tuned. Welcome back to It's All Millennial. Our theme today has been about moving out and the choices of, staying at home or buying your first house or renting. Tough decisions for Gen Y and Millennials. But here today to share more of their thoughts on getting by financially is Justin Herrington, an entrepreneur and with a background in financial planning. Welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Ashley. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So, as I mentioned, we've been talking a lot about goals, setting goals of moving out versus, staying at home. We spoke with a mortgage broker about, budgeting, what's realistic to you. So, from your background, right, in financial advising and in finances, you must see a lot of different budgets and a lot of different perspectives, relating to buying a house.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the big things, and we were talking earlier about what % of your income should be spent on housing. And whether it's a mortgage or rent, the recommended amount is no more than 20% of your income on housing.
Okay.
Because, you've got to pay for food, you could have student debts, gas in your car, and you know what, you got to enjoy some entertainment every once in a while as well.
Of course, life's sweet to have fun a little bit, right?
Exactly.
So 20% of your budget. Now, does this apply to renting? Does this apply to just buying a house?
Either or.
Okay.
Everybody kind of has their own want and what they want. Can you afford to own your own house?
Yes.
Because there's all those extra bills and extra costs that maybe a renter wouldn't have to. Your fridge breaks, your stove breaks, furnace goes. The renter might not have to bear those costs as much as a homeowner would.
Yeah. So 20% towards, housing. Now, in terms of budgeting, or, what do you think about budgeting?
I think one of the big things is, the saying is pay yourself first.
Okay.
So rather than paying the credit card company, paying all your bills and everything at the end of the month, whatever's left is yours, pay yourself first.
Doesn't that seem counterintuitive? Like, oh, you know what, I need to pay off school debt first.
Exactly, but when you look at most OSAP loans, what do a lot of those loans run at? 4.5%, 5%. The student loans through the banks and such.
Yeah.
Where when you're paying yourself, especially how the market's been working in 2014 so far, the interest levels and kind of what your gains are a lot better than the debts.
Okay.
So you're making more money, if you follow me, on the gains rather than the debts. So by paying yourself first, you always have that $100, $200, because you know what, you're always going to, I know, Ashley, you're always going to be able to afford to pay off your debts and pay your credit card.
Yeah.
It's all those little things that maybe you don't need, that little bar night out with the friends. Put that $100 towards yourself first, and then it really grows from then on.
Okay, so you're talking about being more mindful and paying yourself first, and perhaps paying yourself for putting that money aside before we pay things, to say, okay, you know what, this is my play fund, or this is my, is that sort of how you're wording it?
Exactly. Yeah. So once you pay your investments first, whether it be your mutual funds or just into GICs, pay that.
Yourself with your investments. Is what you're saying.
That's how you pay yourself first.
So not buying an extra large Starbucks coffee.
No, exactly. Okay. So once you pay that off, then your credit card,
yes.
Then what's left at the end of the month.
So investing first.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's how that philosophy works, and that's what I've used my whole life, and a lot of my friends as well, and it tends to work pretty well.
So what other thoughts do you have around cash flow management and helping Gen Ys, figure out their housing situations?
Well, I think one big thing is a lot of people really need a financial advisor. Talking to your uncle, your grandfather, their philosophies.
Grandmother
might be well-intended, but not exactly always based around fact and maybe a professional background.
Sure.
So dealing with a financial advisor, even running into your bank, that's how you can create that long-term plan to see, where do you want to be in 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years. Right. It's not just, I want to save money. What are you actually saving for?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think a big part of it, perhaps, and tell me if I'm wrong, is the accountability. When you meet with somebody, they help you take a look on paper, right? Okay, this is what it really looks like, to then say, you know what, let's pay myself, this amount. Let's put this amount here. So I'm thinking a little more accountability with how I'm spending my money and, where my money's going, right?
Exactly. So, it's, this is where we are. This is where we need to be. How do we get from A to B?
Yeah.
And that's part of the whole financial planning process and making yourself accountable. Because then in 3 years when you're not totally at B, you're maybe at B minus.
Yeah.
Well, where did we fall? Where did we get off track? And that's where you divert yourself back in. So again, that's where a financial advisor is very important, that there's that constant follow-up at least every 6 months, just to see how you're doing and making sure that we're going on that right line to success.
Absolutely. Good. Well, very exciting thoughts around, you know, finances and budgeting. Any last tips for our viewers?
You know what, I just always say save as much as you can, and don't be afraid to talk to different people. Being singular thought, just looking at and talking to one financial advisor, you know what, if you talk to multiple, you talk to a Freedom 55, you talk to a Manulife, you talk to, you know, your TD, get a few different opinions, and then see what makes sense most for you.
Yeah, does that get expensive though? You know, does reaching out to all these different advisors or different individuals to get their opinion, I mean, sounds like it might cost a lot of time and money.
You know what, all it is it's a time investment, but I think it's time well spent and well invested. Money, on the money side of things, I mean, I know the Freedom 55 Financial, they're commission based. A lot of the banks, salary plus commission, but they don't make a dollar until you start investing with them.
Okay.
So that's where the key is. So you can use them, tap into all that knowledge and all that advice, but until you actually sign some paper and start giving them your money, there should really be no cost to you.
Yeah, yeah. So do your homework before you do your homework.
Exactly, exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your thoughts. It's really great to, you know, get another perspective on finances and budgeting, and you know, that sort of 20% framework with, you know, how much to allocate to housing. So that's great. Thank you, Justin.
Exactly. Thanks for having me, Ashley.
Awesome. Well, coming up next week, we're going to talk more about love, relationships, and dating. Stay tuned.